Welcome to Blockchain Recorded, the podcast for the tech curious, where we talk about anything and everything related to the exponentially evolving crypto, blockchain, and Web 3.0 space. Our mission is simple: to share knowledge, facilitate discourse, and help evolve education in blockchain fundamentals, decentralization solutions, and relevant use cases for today's digital economy. We at Blockchain Recorded are not registered investment advisors and do not deal with financial or trading token elements, nor offer any licensed financial services. The content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only, while the opinions of all parties involved are their own. I'm your host, Nina Tserar, and now let's talk blockchain. Before I introduce our guest today, I'd like to remind everyone to follow us on X at Recorded Podcast, where we pre-stream each episode on Spaces the day before distribution to all major podcast platforms. For the full platform list, visit our website, blockchainrecorded.com. And with us today, we have Kieran Mesquita, or Kai for short, a contributor to Railgun, an on-chain privacy system project, which we will talk more about today. Kai is a prominent figure in the blockchain and crypto space, contributing to cutting-edge privacy and security technologies. He has worked on a cross-chain private DEX and a zero-knowledge voting system. Additionally, he has researched alternative Layer 1 technologies, developing a novel consensus algorithm and SNARK-based oracle system. Today, Kai is a protocol architect, writing Solidity's smart contracts and designing cryptographic systems for secure and decentralized future. Kai, welcome to Blockchain Recorded.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Sure thing. I'm actually very excited to have this conversation. Privacy is a dear topic to myself, and looking forward to diving in. But before we do so given your bio and your background description, your journey seems mainly within the Web3 space. I noticed on the company website, your title is researcher. All of the team is identified as researcher. Can you just tell us a little bit about your background and how it has brought you to Railgun and where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, just on the title, I think titles, when it comes to small kind of agile contributor teams in the crypto space, the number of different areas that crypto touches, titles tend to be a bit meaningless. So it doesn't really matter what title you wanna stick on my bio. Yeah, I mean, I've been involved in crypto for probably a number of years now. Initially, it was I was a bit too young to really understand what all of this is meant to be. It was just, hey, this is magic internet money. There's cool memes and stuff that's happening. I'll do stuff as well. But later on, as I kind of grew up a bit and will continue to be involved in crypto. I kind of started taking it a bit more seriously, and at the same sort of time, the crypto space also kind of matured, and it was less people throwing back and forth memes and then tipping each other ridiculous amounts of Bitcoin, and to oh well, I like that meme, whatever, and more people actually starting to build some serious projects. And so I looked at this and I thought, okay, well, I've started to understand what this is all for, and I get it, from an ideological standpoint. But I've been in multiple situations where you kind of just, well, a lot of people nowadays just sort of take privacy for they don't really think about it, right? You just assume that nothing bad's going to happen to your data. But the number of experiences I've had where it's the opposite's happened, right?
Right.
Even when you've got some institutions involved which really should be protecting your data and kind of are chartered to do so, when they start to fail and you start seeing people's personal lives kind of abused because of these failings, you start to take privacy seriously. And so me looking at crypto through that sort of a lens is, if I see this, or if I see the space and, I want it to succeed, the current state of affairs where we're just publicly broadcasting all of this information and just hoping, that no one cares enough to look, it's not acceptable, right?
Yep.
If we want crypto to succeed, we need to start thinking about privacy. We need to start taking it seriously. And we need better data hygiene practices before any of this stuff can actually, be used for what its stated purpose is.
I like that, data hygiene practices. It encapsulates the core of it all. Just from my understanding in terms of privacy, personally, it makes me angry of the data and privacy exploitations. But, obviously it's our basic human right. My understanding of it is more philosophical versus mathematical, which is obviously where you come in. Just quickly before I ask you, a lot of conversations today with respect to privacy are also, I think we've also come to a level where we're trying to navigate it with respect to compliance and regulators. So, I did a little research, and there's differences. We obviously have full privacy, which has different implications than versus partial privacy, and then partial has its own spectrum of layers. How you go about and implement different protocols. How do you currently see the state of privacy within the blockchain space, given how it's evolved, and also the regulatory push for transparency? So, okay, obviously we have, not speaking just about DeFi, but just KYCs, and then financial institutions now diving into crypto. And then also for the DeFi space, how do you see the current state of privacy in these realms?
Yeah. Privacy, I guess, we can start by, talking about what privacy isn't, right? Mm-hmm. So privacy isn't, like hiding all things forever, mm-hmm. And immutably, like destroying all information, right? Mm-hmm. That's a very undesired outcome, because in order for people to like interact with each other, we need to be able to like reveal certain things about ourselves, right?
Right.
Like every sort of trade or any other kind of human interaction necessarily requires some communication of information. The problem with, the current state of crypto is all of these blockchains kind of take it and they're radically transparent, right? So it's not just, I guess it comes from like a worry about the traditional financial system where, everything's kind of opaque and you can't really see what's going on. But we've kind of gone too far in the other direction, right? So we need to step back and think, all right, well, what are the aims, right, what's the end goal for what we're trying to do here? And then based on that, make better choices about what information does get revealed publicly, what information gets revealed between, private parties, and what information is for the owner alone, right? And so, to address like one of the things that crypto is meant to kind of solve, right? This opacity of the financial system. If you look at DeFi, there's the ability for effectively anyone to go in and say, well, I have some, I don't know, maybe it's a lending protocol, right? And it says it's always meant to be 2x over collateralized, right? Mm-hmm. So I can go in and like look at the contract address on chain, right? And it says, oh, well, there's $1 million outstanding. Like, all right, well, can I see at least $2 million being held in that contract address, right? Mm-hmm. And it's very simple for me to verify that, compared to, having to dig through various financial disclosure statements and mm-hmm. Legalese and whatnot in order to maybe get some little glimpse into what's going on under the hood elsewhere.
Right.
But at the same time, that same level of transparency isn't something that we'd want for end users, right? Like, we don't want people to be stalked to, oh, well, you buy this coffee at this coffee shop at this time every day, right? And I can see you're a high net worth individual, so mm-hmm. I'm going to be waiting there with a hammer that I bought from the hardware store, down the road. I think when it comes to the kind of privacy here, right? Like we want to make sure that we're preserving this good property where DeFi protocols, right, or financial primitives are easily auditable and can be done so by anyone. But we also want to make sure that, we're not compromising end user privacy, right?
Right.
And there's a couple, there are also a couple more like nuances around that. Maybe you as an end user don't want to associate with certain bad actors, right? You want to show that you're not associating with them. The kind of like default reaction there is, oh, well, why don't we just make all of the data public, right? There's this big pushback against applying privacy to chains because, well, now we can't see any of the stuff. But it's not like just because you want a certain outcome, right, doesn't mean you have to like take whatever lever that gives you that outcome and push it to the extreme, right? You want to push it just far enough, right? So like, what's the minimum amount of data that you're willing to reveal in order to satisfy this condition, right?
Right.
And so there's a number of like cool cryptography techniques and all that you can do that will satisfy this. There's a number of other things, but maybe we end up getting into that later on in the discussion.
Absolutely.
But I think it really is about, at least from a mechanical perspective, right, figuring out what is the least amount of data that I can reveal in order to get the outcome that I want.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into more of the technicals. Just wanted to sort of paint the picture in general. And just as a side question, well, actually, I'm not even sure it's a side question anymore. We sometimes have a side question. AI is obviously gaining more momentum, and it's not even a buzzword anymore. I don't think people even realize or grasp its scale of potential, but that's a whole other story. Where do you think AI comes in terms of impact and privacy for crypto and DeFi? Do you see it? Do you think about it? Do you see it as a concern?
I think like most things, AI is really just an accelerant over what's already happening. The response to, whenever you bring up the question of privacy to people is like, oh, well, who would be, interested in looking at me specifically, right? Like, I'm not particularly interesting. But that problem isn't whether you're interesting or not. It's maybe in the past you could be a little bit more loose with that, right? Because there wasn't the ability for this sort of data to be collected en masse. It couldn't be sifted through en masse. It couldn't be, kind of like, you couldn't be micro-targeted in an automated fashion, right? And everyone have this happen to them en masse, right? And this is just stuff that happens all the time now, because we've got, technologies kind of advanced to the stage where, why wouldn't you just automate all of this away? And so, AI just, again, is another accelerant on top of that, but that's been the trend for a while.
Well, let's jump into Railgun. I saw, so you're on your website. I was trying to get like an actual short definition of what Railgun is. And your website states Railgun is on-chain ZK privacy for DeFi, and then for Ethereum, Arbitrum, NFTs, Polygon, etc. So before we actually dive into what Railgun is, it would be great to clarify the meaning of ZK, which I'm sure that you've done a zillion times, but I think it's important to clarify it so that we can continue the conversation, and maybe we can clarify it from your angle and guide us or guide our audience through the already existing use cases and solutions that use ZK tech.
Yeah, so ZK is kind of old-ish, relatively speaking. It's just that it didn't really find
oldish.
it didn't really find a use case until Zcash came around and applied it to transactions. But essentially, it's a way of taking a certain statement and then showing that it's true, or showing that a particular statement is true without revealing any of the details that go into that statement, right? So probably the best example that I've heard, of how to explain this would be, imagine you've got like a Where's Wally or a Where's Waldo textbook, right? Whatever it might be called in your part of the world. And, I want to prove to you that I know where Wally is, right? But I don't want to ruin the fun for you, right? You want to go off and find Wally on your own. So
I love the Wally example. Sorry.
Yeah. So what I could do is I could take like a big piece of card, right, such that it's much larger than the book, and I go and cut a little hole into the card that's just about big enough to see Wally through, and I go and position the book behind this card such that it's Wally's like visible through the hole, right? And now you can go along and have a look at this card. You can look through the hole and you see, oh, well, there's Wally, right? So clearly I must know where Wally is in order to have positioned the book such that, that the hole is on top of Wally, right? But because the card's hiding the book, you can't really like tell which part of the book Wally's in, right? And so now if you want to go off and solve that yourself, right, it hasn't really ruined any of the fun for you. And so that's kind of the like analog example of like a zero knowledge proof. The digital one, or the stuff that's used in cryptocurrencies and so on, tends to be a little bit more moon mathy, but the basic premise is the same. If I've got like a transaction system, right, so Zcash, Railgun, whatever, I'm essentially showing that, this encrypted transaction is valid by whatever the rules of the system are. And, I'm not minting coins out of thin air, and like I've actually got the private keys that allow me to spend those funds and so on, whatever else that there may be. And I can generate this proof over an encrypted transaction and then submit that encrypted transaction to the network. And now the network knows, because of the properties of like zero knowledge proofs, that even though it can't read the transaction, it can accept it as valid. So, the first kind of production use case for zero knowledge proofs would be transaction systems. I think, to date, realistically, there's only two kind of real use cases to ZK. The other one actually has nothing to do with privacy at all. It's to do with scaling, because ZK also has this property where, because you're not revealing any of the details that go into the statement, you're just showing that the statement is true, right? You can have this really complex backend that, maybe it's processing some super complicated transaction, and you've got like whatever the state of your system was before, or maybe that might be some balances or whatever storage for some dApps. And then you've got the state of the system afterwards. And, anyone that wants to go and verify that whatever like chain this is correct doesn't need to go and, simulate every single transaction themselves and check that the results match. The producer of this chain or blocks or whatever can go off and instead generate a zero knowledge proof that just simply says this block was, it's valid by whatever the rules of this blockchain network is. And, here's the end result. And people can just verify this one proof rather than every single transaction. There's other things that are being worked on. I mean, I guess it's like, self-sovereign identity and things like that. But I don't think I've really seen any widespread production use of that, at least not to the same degree that private transactions and scaling get used.
Okay. So how does Railgun then work in practice? I listened to an older podcast with Alan, so your co-researcher, and I was under the impression that Railgun is also its own wallet. But during a recent speaking engagement, you mentioned that Railgun is clearly not a wallet, but is a privacy protocol. Maybe before that, if maybe you can just explain the evolutionary sort of advancements of how Railgun evolved, or maybe I just didn't understand it correctly. But I thought at first it was a wallet, then it's not a wallet, or just maybe encapsulate it all.
Yeah, so Railgun has always been a privacy protocol. Essentially, what it enables is the existence of a new address type on Ethereum, or other EVM chains. So like a Railgun address would start with 0zk instead of 0x. So that's how you differentiate the two. But essentially, the wallet, or it enables wallets to, have this address type. So Railgun itself isn't a wallet in the same way that, you wouldn't say, whatever the system or the cryptography in place to allow, your standard 0x addresses to exist. It's a wallet. It's just simply that's the code and that's the cryptography that exists that allow those things to take place. So on top of Railgun, right? So you can have, wallets that do implement Railgun addresses. So there's a couple of them at the moment. Terminal Wallet, Railway, Token Shielder, for example. So those are all examples of wallets that implement the Railgun protocol. And so, like in a similar way to how you'd like access Ethereum through MetaMask, right? So MetaMask is your wallet. Like Railway or Terminal Wallet would be the way that you'd access your balance in your 0zk address.
Okay. So you actually did explain a little bit more in practice in terms of about the address. How is Railgun then different from other privacy protocols that you're aware of?
Yeah. Well, I think Railgun's unique in the sense that it's actually like it's a private address protocol, right? Probably the first thing that people would want to compare it to would be mixers, right? So what mixers do is, you take like a bunch of funds, you put them in, some like you effectively put them in a jar together, you shake it up, and then people grab their funds at the end of it, right? And you've just got this perpetual jar shaking going on. And, but essentially at the end of it, right, once you've gotten your funds out, you kind of just throw away whatever the data is that went into it, right? The difference between that and a private address system is you still have a regular address, right, with like a transaction history. It can go and interact with DeFi protocols. It can do whatever you do with like a regular address, right? The only difference there is that instead of publishing your transaction history and your balances and everything publicly by default, it's only visible to the wallet owner. And, if that wallet owner decides to go and share those details later on, that's up to them. It's just not something that's radically public for all the world to see, by default.
So you guys are on, Railgun is on, supports Ethereum, Arbitrum, Polygon, right? Chains. Are there any other ones that I'm missing?
So it's Ethereum, Polygon, BSC, and Arbitrum.
All right, Binance Chain. How do you go about selecting the chains to support or to incorporate?
Yeah, well, I mean, like Railgun itself is pretty chain neutral. I don't think any of the contributors want to be, picking any winners or losers. It's just, hey, where's the usage, right? So at the point or at the time of deployment for those various chains that is currently on, there was reasonable amount of usage there, and so you had the vote go to the relevant Railgun DAO contracts, and vote passed, and so you've got a Railgun deployment on those various chains. There haven't been any like recent Railgun like new deployments. The largest reason behind that is there's a number of like minimum requirements for each chain to support before like Railgun can be deployed on those chains. Mostly that's relevant to kind of roll-ups. And there's also kind of the fragmentation of governance that also needs to be looked at. So I guess that is a point of research for a couple of contributors, but there's obviously been more pressing things to look into for everyone that's contributing at the moment, and maybe those priorities for some people might end up rearranging, or end up having new contributors start looking at solving that fragmentation problem again, and we start seeing deployments on other chains, but up until then, it's just, where Railgun's currently deployed is where usage was at the time. And yeah, we'll hopefully see new chains being brought into the fold again soon.
Okay, great. So just thinking about the addresses, the example that you just talked about. So in essence, I heard you talking about that it's sort of a shielding, right? Can you maybe talk a little bit more about that? So I'm sort of a layperson in this, looking at it. So you shield these addresses, and then I would assume, just in terms of a regulatory, let me go it this way. How do you navigate with, I don't know, if there's probably conventional privacy and security laws across different, geographic regions and or jurisdictions, if you may call it. And so in essence, you're kind of a privacy enabler. I would think that you could quickly get on the radar screen for regulators and authorities. Is this a conversation that you have with regulators and have to work in sync to do this, or just wondering how this works in practice?
Yeah, I mean, I do have to disclaimer this. I mean, I'm not a lawyer or anything. I'm just like tech.
Yeah, I'm not. Of course, of course, I'm not either. I'm not either. I'm just thinking, like you said, if you're doing full privacy, you also don't want to do that, and then, automatically you want to disclose enough information. But I'm just thinking, the more secretive or the more you shield something, the more regulators and authorities get on your case. This is all just, conversation. No one's a lawyer. No one's anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it comes down to, I think in effectively every single other field, we don't see the outcome ever being that everything should be radically public, right? I mean, that's never the outcome. It's always, what is the end goal that we want, and then what's the level of data that needs to be disclosed in order to reach that goal, right? Mm-hmm. And that goes both ways, right? So it's what data don't we want to disclose, and to who, and what data do we want to disclose, right? Mm-hmm. When it comes to Railgun, there is a system that's currently being put through its paces over the last, I don't know, February now, so 2 months-ish or so, called PPOI. And essentially, what that does is it allows people to go and show that, whatever I've been, my details aren't publicly available on the blockchain for anyone to look at. But I do want to go and show that, I'm not associated with some particular set of actors, right? Mm-hmm. And so, using the fact that all data, even though it's encrypted, is still actually, cryptographically bound on chain, you can go and generate, going back to the ZK thing, right? You can prove the truth of a particular statement without revealing any of the details that go into that statement. So you can prove that you're not associated with certain wallets or transactions without showing that, or without, publicly revealing all of your transaction details, right? And then, if you need to go in and show any further details, you can, I think most privacy systems will have the ability to generate a view key. So you can hand that off to whoever you may need to. But yeah, I think, finding ways to, with PPOI, right, minimizing the amount of data that you publicly reveal while still being able to hit the end goal that you're trying to do is kind of the way forward. Yeah, that seems to be the way that, anywhere that things have been done sanely and have been operating well for a while, that seems to be the way that people, or that, the industry moves, and I don't see why that shouldn't be the way that crypto moves as well.
Mm-hmm. Just for our audience sake, PPOIs means private proofs of innocence, right?
Yep.
It's a interesting, very valid and pragmatic concept. Vitalik talks about it, right? I don't know. I didn't know much about it. I was trying to research as much as possible. So any light that you shed on it, this conversation is very helpful and educational. So in terms of private proofs of innocence, so this means that you, maybe a stupid question, but so Railgun does incorporate this private proof of innocence?
So private proofs of innocence is essentially just like another protocol that allows you to take your data that's on-chain, right, shielded, and make a particular statement about it. Mm-hmm. And it is a little bit interesting, with everything being like self-custodial. You can't, the end user, right, like you've got your, I think everyone's heard the phrase, your keys, your coins, right, or not your keys, not your coins. So you've got your 12 words, right, and that's kind of your key to accessing your coins. You hold your coins yourself. No one else can take them from you, and so on. But it's essentially the way that all of these tools work just boils down to giving the user the ability to make statements about what their data is in the least or in the most privacy preserving way, right? So the least invasive way. And, I again, it just comes down to, people are going to have different requirements for how they need to do these things, depending on, who else they're interacting with. Maybe they're interacting with a certain, financial institution, or they're in a particular jurisdiction, whatever the case may be. But it's how do you give people the tools to be able to go and make, the statements that they need to in the best way possible for them.
Does this also address the case for bad actors and malevolent, sort of just bad actor cases? Or does this not have anything to do with that? So market manipulation, hacking, etc. Is this a way to diminish that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the type of statements that PPI enables is effectively or directly counters the kind of bad actors that you described, right? So essentially, if you're just a regular user, you want to be able to make these statements, and or by essentially building up this trove of disassociations, you can effectively split out a particular bad actor from a privacy set.
Mm-hmm. So who all uses the Railgun protocol? You've got dApp developers, if I'm not mistaken. Then you provide wallet SDK. So who all uses? Who's a user?
Yeah, so the protocol directly. There's a couple of different actors in the system. Mm-hmm. So you've got the smart contracts, which that's like the core of the protocol, right? So that those just live on Ethereum nodes and run in the same way that any other smart contract would. Then there's wallets. So that's the way that it makes it convenient to interact with smart contracts. I mean, obviously, if you have the required technical skills, you can always go to the contracts directly, but not everyone does. So wallets make it convenient to interact with smart contracts. Mm-hmm. And then there's just people doing stuff, right? So, I couldn't tell you everything that people are doing with Railgun. But from and you probably wouldn't want me to publicly reveal all that, being a privacy protocol and all. But
sure,
from the conversations that I've had, and being careful not to dox anyone.
Sure.
People have used it for payroll, for example, right? You want to be able to pay your employees, but you don't want everyone to, be able to stalk and be like, oh, well, that guy at your company makes this amount, and, this is where he spends whatever, or she makes that amount and she spends it on this other thing, right?
Right.
So payroll's a pretty big use case. There's just people that, trade random shitcoins and don't want the market to know what they're buying and selling, right? Yeah, there's a couple of people that are using it to yield farm, while making sure that the exact sizes of the positions aren't known anywhere, right? So there's a number of different use cases going on.
What about, Railgun, we talked about that it's on chain for the different blockchains, but then you also have NFTs. So how does that work in practice?
Yeah, so I mean the NFTs themselves, you can effectively, like, again, Railgun just being a new address type can store whatever tokens need to be stored, right? So that's ERC20s, ERC721s, 1155s at the moment. So the NFT, like the token representation, can be held in a Railgun contract or in a Railgun address. And that doesn't necessarily mean that, like, the NFT, like, data itself has to be held on chain, right? Most of the time it's just it's a link to some website, where the actual images are stored. Sometimes it's IPFS, but the on-chain representation, which is the little, like, ERC721, that can be held in a Railgun address, no problems.
Okay. Just taking a little shift here. Can you talk about Railgun's monetization model? I don't know if you're allowed to say that, but, like, basically, how do you guys earn money? Like, what's your business model?
So Railgun has been quite explicitly a DAO from day one, and kind of, like, radically so, to the point that a lot of people have been a little bit confused because you're used to hearing, oh well, we're a DAO, but then like, oh, we're centralized until we hit certain milestones or whatever. So I think, surprisingly, the largest number of challenges that we faced with being a DAO from day one has just been the fact that, well, I've just been related to the fact that everyone assumes that you're lying about it. If that makes sense, they
Really?
just, oh, well, yeah, everyone's saying
God.
that we're a DAO, right? Everyone's saying that you're a DAO, but, like, no one's really a DAO, are they? But, in this case, like, we actually are.
Yeah.
So because of that, all of the decisions that I made in Railgun, I'd like to think of myself as a fairly prominent contributor. I've written a fair amount of code and
Yes.
done various things, but I have no ability to push through any decision, right? Like, doesn't matter how much I want to, it's just I have the capability to do. And you can ask any other contributor and they'll give you the same story, right? So the final, like, decision making power is through, like, a Railgun, like, DAO governance vote. And the way that votes are actually carried out is you're not voting on, like, you have a lot of kind of, like, temperature check stuff, like, oh, well, we'll put up some write-up and then, we'll vote on whether that write-up is good. And then it's up to, like, some group of people behind the scenes to actually carry out what's written in that proposal. So in Railgun, there's none of that. You're actually voting on what the actions that the governance contract will take on chain are. So, maybe, like, that's I don't know what it could be, like deploying, like, a new contract, right? You'd actually have the contract put up into the governance system, right? Or the code or the bytecode, right, for the contract get put on chain. And then you'd put up this governance proposal that says, activate this contract. And you'll have the actual, calls to, like, enable this contract baked into the governance proposal itself, right? And so when you're voting on a governance proposal in Railgun, you're not voting on some pretty document, right? Like, you're voting on what the actual, the literal actions that happen on chain are. And, that's kind of a double-edged sword. It means that anytime that, like, any upgrades want to go through, there's, like, it as much as I'd like to be able to just for efficiency's sake, like, put whatever through and like, I totally trust myself not to screw everyone else using Railgun, but, like, that's just not the case. And yeah, I think we've been lucky in the sense that at least the supply of tokens that are staked have been constantly relatively high. And, participation and governance has also been relatively high. And so there hasn't really been any kind of like voter apathy problems, but maybe there haven't been. But I think that is actually a very real concern down the line. Like what happens when people just stop caring and not voting on proposals? Like there is no admin key. Like there is no way to make decisions. So it's a double-edged sword. But I think given that Railgun's kind of positioned as, or Railgun is just like an on-chain protocol, and it's meant to benefit and extend the Ethereum or just whatever EVM system not being owned by anyone is sort of
but it has to be a DAO
necessity. Yeah, and it has to be an actual DAO.
Right.
There's no smoke and mirror fake decentralization, and we just deal with all of the inconvenience that comes along with that.
Yeah, I mean that's a whole nother story, right? With DAOs and some of the shortcomings that DAOs can face. I think the important factor is that it's set up in the right way. You have to have your governance in place, your tokenomics in place. It has to be clear cut. And you're right, the apathy factor is another thing, but. I mean, that's also an evolution process, right? So DAOs have evolved as well, and they will keep evolving. But yeah, so it's a good thing that you're a DAO.
Yeah.
We've established that. How many people are on your team in Railgun?
I mean, again, being a DAO, there isn't really a hard and fast team.
Right, or the actors that are voting?
Oh, I could not tell you that. I have no idea. Yeah, there's some amount of anime profile pictures and whatnot that are doing those things. So
I'm just curious. So are you? Is Railgun's a DAO? So, but are you guys audited?
Yeah. So
and by whom?
We've had multiple audits. So yeah, before anything goes up to governance vote to be deployed, it goes through a couple of rounds of auditing, and how that looks like depends on the nature of the contracts. Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you go to the railgun.org info site, there should be some links to some of the audits. There's been some private review as well. So not everything. Not every code audit ends up in a nice little PDF report at the end. Oftentimes it actually doesn't, because, what you want is a lot of, behind the scenes reviews. Make sure that when you're ready to get the code into a final state, it's very, very watertight. And that requires constant reviews through the development process. And then, before things go up to audit, there'll usually be an audit from Zokyo have been the most prominent auditing firm, but we've had audits from Hacken and ABTK and a few other places as well. And then that will produce a report as well, so people that are looking at the governance proposal can also refer to the audit to make sure that what they're voting on is secure.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks for answering that. I also see a lot of prominent partner names. Can you shed a little light on your partner ecosystem?
Yeah, I should probably look at who's made it to the partner list again. Yeah, I don't spend very much time on the railgun.org site.
You don't? Yeah.
No, I prefer to...
Fair enough.
Prefer to just busy myself with cryptography.
We can include the source in the show notes, but we're just curious if you agreed. I mean, obviously, yeah, you do deal with the cryptography, but just curious if you have any.
Yeah, so just looking through them, I mean, I guess Arbitrum, Polygon, places where there exist Railgun deployments. There's a Waku logo in there. So Waku is a private networking layer for dApps. So I know things like RPC communications and things like that generally. Even when you have a protocol that's entirely on chain, right? Like wallets still need to communicate with, like Ethereum nodes and things like this over the internet, right? You don't magically have a blockchain that lives in your house that you can like shove things into. Like you have to send that data over the internet to nodes. So yeah, Waku is private networking library that I think all of the Railgun wallets use to communicate. Yeah, we got Beefy. Okay,
Beefy.
I know you can farm privately on Beefy using Railgun. So
I see.
That would be why they're there.
Cool.
Yeah, I think they're mostly just places and ways that you can use Railgun.
So with everything that you've talked about, what lies ahead for you guys? Like what's in store for Railgun's short term? So I guess short term meaning more like 2024, and even the long-term roadmap. I mean, are you guys mostly focusing sort of within the DeFi space, or do you see yourself going beyond the scope?
Yeah, I think like the core mandate for the Railgun DAO is, it's effectively just it's a private address format for Ethereum. So anything that you could do with a regular 0x address, you should be able to do with a 0zk address. So, at the moment, that's mostly DeFi, but maybe we start to see some other use cases be enabled on Ethereum, and you should be able to do that through, engage in those activities, whatever they may be, through Railgun as well. I think short term, there's a couple of, I think the biggest friction point for people using Railgun right now is gas cost, right? Like Ethereum's not a cheap network, and Railgun does a fair bit of computation on chain. And so, gas fees tend to be proportional to that. Being able to bring gas costs down through things like probably some re-architecting of the way that cross-contract calls are done. Let's see, things like...
Sorry, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt in terms of the gas problem.
Yep.
There's kind of like a mini trend with chains coming up with their like gasless solutions. Like just last week, I hosted a protocol that is supposed to be like the first feeless and tokenless public blockchain. How does that? What do you think about that? Or do you have any thoughts on that in terms of where you might fit in terms of the gas issue? I mean, it seems like people are working on that and trying to get rid of that. So it's because it's all about adoption, right? So yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I like Railgun being an entirely on-chain system is kind of does kind of have to like conform to the way that the base chain does things, and so like any sort of improvement to Ethereum or any of the other like EVM chains that Railgun exists on is going to benefit Railgun as well. But I think essentially like I think most of the like gasless stuff comes down to effectively people sponsoring transactions, right? Maybe there ends up being some cool application that you can use on Railgun, and then those transactions could be sponsored by whoever built that application. That's a possibility. But I think like ultimately there's still like a computational cost that needs to be borne by the network, right? So you're taking up block space. And so, on the chain side, increasing the chain capacity and making like node software more efficient and so on, like that's things that can be worked on the chain side. And then on the Railgun side, it's about how do you take all of the computation that needs to be done and make it as efficient as possible so that you're taking the least amount of block space, or you require the least amount of block space to function. So it's a problem that can be tackled on both sides.
Great. So you talked about the friction points and sort of what to work on and overcome. What would you say, and I'm sure everybody asked you this, what would you say has been your biggest challenge, or have you had any challenges in your experience with Railgun? Apart from the DAOs. Just no pun intended, just kidding.
Yeah, I think okay, this might sound a little bit mean, but
no, it's okay. It's honest.
Either the like willful misunderstanding or just how primed like the way things are done in the space by, you know, a lot of people. Like people always, we've gotten very used to this kind of doublespeak, right? So we say we're decentralized and, you know, whatever these ideals might be, and then, you know, it's just like, oh, well, don't worry about, like, that's, we'll if you actually dig on into it, like, you look under the hood and it's like, it's a mess, and then everyone's just like, oh, well, we'll get there eventually, it's an evolving thing, and
it's still early.
And, you know, while in a lot of cases that can be true, I think, you know, there's legitimate, that is a legitimate argument in some cases. That argument also ends up getting used by people that actually have no intention of actually following through on ideals, and, you know, are just espousing certain viewpoints in order to you know, get attention, get a following, whatever. And when you come into crypto and, you know, you're actually trying to build things that, you know, meet what you're actually saying, right? Like, you actually try to do the thing that everyone's talking about.
Yeah, and abiding by the core fundamentals of it all, right?
Yeah. I think the, like, biggest challenge has just been everyone's so used to all of these projects going out and saying, oh, we're, you know, a certain way, and then the reality is something else, that like, you end up having to effectively work extra hard to be like, oh no, like, we're actually doing it this way. And, you know, people just don't understand why you can't. They're like, oh, well, you know, yeah, you're a DAO, that's all good, but, like, why can't you just, like, make this thing happen, right? And you're like, no, like, we actually are a DAO. There isn't an admin key that people can use to do that, right? Or, like, oh no, we're actually a DAO. We can't just, like, sign on behalf, like, have someone, you know, sign a contract on behalf of, like, the protocol. Like, all of these, like, points of friction that, you know, you'd think people don't have to deal with because of, like, what they're saying they do. But actually, you know, it ends up being a challenge for you because no one else is willing to walk the walk.
I was just going to say that, like, walk the walk and talk the talk, and yeah. I mean, I'm obviously I'm not a developer. I'm not a software architect, and I see things from a different perspective, and, you know, have talk to so many projects here, and we try to sort of select ones that, you know, we think are actually going to have, like, a use case impact. But yeah, there's a lot of decentralization and, you know, sacrificing decentralization to achieve this and that. And sometimes not even, like you said, not going with the core fundamentals, right? Achieving things just to get ahead and for that like. And but that's a whole other philosophical conversation I could talk for hours about. It's yeah, and then there's the component of just marketing it all out. So, but nonetheless, I mean, I commend you for that. It's an honest answer, and I would just, you know, say keep doing what you're doing. I think I don't know. I'm a positive person, and then I always think, or an honest, you know, person. If you just feel like honesty is the best policy, and if you stay true to yourself and you do what you think you need to be doing, even though everyone's sort of brushing things under the rug, I think that's going to get you further in the end. I don't know if it's idealistic in this time of the world, but I don't know. It's gotten me in the end. If you stick true to yourself, I think it's the best thing. Well, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I think my like personal position on that has effectively just ended up being like, I don't want to be in a world where we can't actually, you know, pull this off. And
yeah.
So maybe, like, I'm doomed to be constantly, like, an over optimist on all of this and a little bit naive, but at the same time, like, I don't like the alternative.
Yeah. And
so I'll constantly be doing what I do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's the right mindset to have. That is a major challenge. Well, with that in mind, it's good to be positive. How do you see the crypto privacy ecosystem evolve? Or do you think of that, like where things are going? Obviously, otherwise you wouldn't be doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I think the problem with the privacy ecosystem to date has been we haven't had a proper discussion on actually on all of the actual nuances of how privacy works, right? And I think that's just been out of necessity, till well, probably now as well, just because of the way that certain actors have behaved, right? So you've got like regulators, you've got malicious entities, and so on. And so the discussion around privacy has always just been framed as this sort of like binary, right?
Yeah.
And I think in order for the privacy space to really move forward, we need to have that more nuanced and more kind of like realistic discussion on privacy, right? It's like it's not either like you should be able to have it or you shouldn't be able to have it, and it's absolute or whatever the case may be. I think and until we're ready to have the discussion, I don't think we move forward in the crypto privacy space, and wider, I don't think crypto space as a whole moves forward, because I think like the privacy question is just a roadblock for like any of this stuff to work.
Yeah, it's a big one. How would you like, just concretely, how would you like to see this happen? And who, for example? Like what would be your best ideal, like you're saying, we need to have this conversation. Like how do you envision that? What would you like to see?
That is a tough one, right? Because you're like, well...
Like, should Vitalik be there?
Dude, yeah.
Yeah.
Are we like...
I mean, it can't be just one. It's
I guess like the answer to that question is just like, how do we find a good enough cross-section of people that like accurately represent the different interests in, and like not even just in the current crypto space, but like the interests of all of the potential future users of crypto and all of the people that could potentially benefit from this technology being more widely adopted. I mean, yeah, you mentioned Vitalik, and I think given his track record, it's probably a good person to have in the conversation. And I think given the current state of the world and, what the actions of different entities, I think like regulators kind of have to be at the table as well.
An obvious one.
And, I think, but yeah, I think that the largest level of participation needs to be from like, can we identify who stands to benefit the most from crypto going mainstream, right? Being widely used, and like what are those people's needs? I don't know how we can bring them into the conversation, but we need to.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, you can kind of anticipate then once you have the regulators and once it absolutely has to be, everyone has to be just put everything out on the table. Then it's just a matter of, well, how is it going to roll from there? The regulators are going to want, fuller, as much as transparency as possible, and then, give or take. But yeah, you're right. I mean, the ball needs to get rolling, and whether or not that means, I don't know. Has there been like a privacy conference? I mean, is this a thing? Are you ever involved? I mean, I know there's like, different dev cons and conference this and conference that, but like, is there actually like a conference where all you talk about is privacy?
I don't think there has been one up until like very so I last year I attended 2 conferences that were particularly high quality in the privacy space. So I went to ETH and later on to ETH Rome. So ETH I think I got to give a little bit of a shout out to Eleanor Blanc, the founder of CryptoCanal. But specifically, I think that conference came out of, I mean, it's Amsterdam-based from the name, but it came out of the aftermath of the Tornado Cash, arrests. And so, that was a particularly valuable conference in bringing a lot of the more active players in the privacy space together. And ETH Rome was a good kind of hackathon on just general privacy related tech. I don't think next year's one for ETH Rome is going to be privacy focused, but last year's was good. And I think the privacy focused events tend to be fairly small, unfortunately.
I was just going to ask that. Is it a big thing, or is it, that's unfortunate. But nonetheless, you're right. I commend you. I think it would be very helpful actually crucial to do that, because I don't think people realize how important it is. Well, Kai, thanks so much. I think we've talked a great deal. I'm really enjoying this conversation. Is there anything that I maybe have not asked that you would want to share with us still?
No, I think we've covered a good cross section of things. Yeah.
Great. I agree. And well, as we wrap this up, so Kai, what is the best way to follow your work, or perhaps contact or participate? Yeah.
So I am Mesquka most places, but probably Twitter, or now X, is where I'm most active. And weirdly, if you follow want to follow Railgun, railgun.org is the website. There's at railgun_project on Twitter /X as well. Yeah, I think that's about it for
the context.
So social media presence.
Which, we have kind of ironic given that we're talking about privacy, but thank you. We'll definitely include all the information in the show notes. Again, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I personally learned a lot by talking with you and researching Railgun and revisiting ZK and looking into private POIs, etc. And, like we said, building solutions for privacy are inherently important, and more people need to take part. And not sure people even realize how important it is. So all the best to you and the DAO. And I think you guys are doing valuable work. So keep it up.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks again to our guests, and thank you everyone for listening. Thanks also to the Bariam Music team for providing their music. You can check them out on bariammusic.com. The episode supporting information is on our website, blockchainrecorded.com. Our podcast is available on Google, Apple, and Amazon Podcasts, as well as on YouTube, Spotify, and Radio Public. You can follow us on Twitter at Recorded Podcast and YouTube, where we are super grateful for your support. Stay tuned for our next episode.